Hello and welcome back to a very late episode of First Impressions. This one is about a release that, in an ideal world, I would have addressed right when it came out. However, the thing is, when this came out last year, I thought that First Impressions was done. I thought I was never going to do any other episodes of these. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I've obviously changed my opinion since then. But as a result, I pretty much missed out on this, and this is the new-ish Nine Inch Nails EP, not the actual events. Now, in the coming weeks, I will review both this and Add Violence, and I'm fairly excited for what Trent's going to be doing next. Supposedly, there's going to be another EP that will finish up the series. Apparently, this is what he's doing. He's going to have 3 EPs this year. I suppose this EP was last year, but you get what I'm saying. It was late last year. But no, I missed out on this when it came out, which, listening to it is a real shame because this is far more to my liking than what Nine Inch Nails has been doing for about 10 to 15 years. Because the thing that, and all the Nine Inch Nails fans, you can maybe skip 4 or 5 minutes from here to where I actually get to talk about the album. But for all the newbies who maybe haven't listened to a lot of Nine Inch Nails, there's really 2 sides of Nine Inch Nails. There's everything up to and including The Fragile, and then there's everything after The Fragile. Because, after The Fragile, Trent got clean, he had a shift in location, he got into a different musical mindset and has kind of stayed there ever since. And while I've liked a lot of what he's come out with since The Fragile, Year Zero is still probably my second favorite Nine Inch Nails album. Ghosts, I can't really rate with the other Nine Inch Nails albums, and I haven't listened to it much because I've got to be in the mood, but Ghosts is fantastic. Reznor really does moody soundscape stuff really well. And Ghost is fantastic. But the other side of his post-Fragile stuff, the more like normal Nine Inch Nails side of the post-Fragile stuff, I've been a lot less into. Because, Ghosts was this weird, big experimental project. Year Zero was very focused. It has a concept. There's a storyline to the album. There was an alternate reality game, which sadly, by the time I got the album, and nowadays, the album's 10 years old, none of that stuff's really around anymore. But it had a really cool alternate reality game involved in its release. It's a very focused album. It's one of his best for sure. But the other side of his post-Fragile stuff, which is kind of just like normal Nine Inch Nails, is not really to my liking. With Teeth is an album where I get past the first couple songs and I get pretty bored with it. There's a few songs that kind of bring it back at the end, but I still get pretty bored with it. And then neither The Slip or Hesitation Marks really did it for me. And the last bit may be controversial because the Hesitation Marks was one of those albums that came out and it got really good reviews. And I listened to it and I just didn't get it. To this day, Hesitation Marks still does not appeal to me as much as any of his other albums. And so I'm a 50-50 on his newer stuff. Thankfully, this album really surprised me because the first song, which is only about 1.5 minutes long, sounds like post-Fragile Nine Inch Nails. After that, pretty much every song on here, with the exception of Dear World, could have been on a 90s Nine Inch Nails album. Dear World sounds like something that could have been on Year Zero, and as I said, Year Zero is my favorite post-Fragile Nine Inch Nails album, so that's good. But everything else on here sounds like it could have been on The Fragile. Like, if a younger Trent sang on these songs and they had different production, they could have been on The Fragile in '99. And that's something I really, really like about this EP. Just about every song on here is good. I will say Branches and Bones doesn't really stick out to me, but it's so short that I don't even notice. Dear World is fantastic. It has this awesome electronica thing, like glitchy electronic thing happening on there. Really like when he does that stuff. Did it really well on Year Zero. Hesitation Marks felt like he was trying to do it and it didn't really work as well, but it did work on some songs. She's Gone Away, I think, is the song he did for Twin Peaks, or for the new Twin Peaks this year. He's still working with Atticus Ross, who has been with him for a while now, and he did some good stuff on the Hesitation Marks. And Hesitation Marks is an album that I do kind of talk down about, but I like a lot of Hesitation Marks. That's a great song. The Idea of You is really, really good. That song, the last two songs in particular, really reminded me of The Fragile. Like, both The Idea of You and Burning Bright could have been instrumental songs on The Fragile. Like, it just reminded me of, like, the really cool, moody soundscapes on that album. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say about this album. I don't really have much else to say about this EP. I think it's very, very good. I am very excited to hear what else Trent Reznor is going to do in the next year or so. He is a tremendous talent who sometimes obscures said talent with some of the other aspects of his persona. I mean, I know a lot of people who might like Nine Inch Nails who are so turned off by the lyrics, like, that they can't get into any of it. Like I know more than one person who would probably love The Fragile if The Fragile was an instrumental album, but the kind of like mopey, whiny, edgy lyrics turn them off completely. And that's a real shame because, as I've said, he's a tremendous talent, and if you haven't checked out Nine Inch Nails, you definitely should. And this, honestly, is not the worst place you could start. I mean, naturally, I would recommend you get the Downward Spiral first, but this isn't a bad album to go to after that.